Hello.
Good day. We'll wait a few minutes and allow people to join the workshop before we get started. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, Abdullah. I suggest we give participants another few minutes to join before we get started, if that's okay with you.
Sure, hi Mike. Sure. Let me wait for that.
Great, thank you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
عليكم السلام. يا
Abdullah, seeing how it's 4 minutes past the hour, shall we get started?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mike, for setting up this meeting. And also thank you for everyone who attended this meeting. We really appreciate the efforts and the work that has been done from OpenID Foundation in collaboration with SAMA team to create the KSA profile and the starting of the certification program for the KSA profile. We appreciate the efforts and the work, and we hope all the best for the fintechs in their work to get certified for OpenID for the FAPI Reliant Party certification. Thank you. I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Thank you for the opening remarks and a warm welcome, Abdullah. We really appreciate it. Just a couple of administrative topics before we get started. I did want to note for all participants that the workshop is being recorded. You should have been notified of that when you joined the Zoom session. We'll be publishing the workshop after, so that and sharing the link with the SAMA team that they can then share with the ecosystem, so that you'll have access to both the brief slides that we'll go through as well as the demonstration. As far as questions, we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers, but please stop us at any point, either during the brief slide overview or while we're demonstrating the KSA FAPI Profile RP conformance suite. Feel free to come off mute, ask a question, or feel free to drop any questions into the chat. So without further ado, just some brief introductions. My name is Mike Les. I'm the program manager at the OpenID Foundation. I'm joined by two colleagues today, Joseph Heenan, who heads up the certification program at the foundation, and Dominguez Credo, who's a member of the OpenID Foundation certification program team. So I want to thank them both for their efforts in not only supporting the workshop today, but in developing the KSA FAPI OP and RP test and getting those open for certification. So thank you both. Just a quick review of the agenda for today's workshop. I'm just going to go through a quick overview of the foundation, so you know a little bit about who we are. Then we'll do a quick brief introduction to the FAPI profile, including the KSA FAPI profile. A quick overview of the certification program, and then we'll get into the thick of the workshop, which is a demonstration of the conformance test suite. And as I mentioned, we will ensure that there's plenty of time at the end to have an active Q&A session. So without further ado, the OpenID Foundation is a nonprofit international standards development organization that was founded in 2007. So we've been around for a while now. The foundation's focused on the development of open internet identity and security standards to ensure robust global deployments while enabling interoperability. All OpenID standards are developed within foundation working groups. These working groups are made up of a global community of experts that develop and validate standards through an open consensus-based process. All of our standards are actively maintained and evolved as needed to support existing and new use cases. I'll share that we encourage anyone to get involved in OpenID Foundation working groups, while foundation membership is encouraged to help us support the efforts of the organization. You do not need to be a member of the foundation to participate and contribute to OpenID Foundation working groups. The only requirement is you sign a contribution agreement saying that you agree to our IPR policy. And then back in 2015, the OpenID Foundation Board of Directors made the decision to invest significantly into the OpenID certification program, which ensures compliant, secure, and interoperable deployments. And we'll get into those details in a little bit. in a little bit more detail when we get to the certification program overview. While we're based in the U.S., we're a global organization made up of members and contributors and participants all around the world. These are our current sustaining members, which are our board members. So I'll share that as a nonprofit, about a third of our revenue is based on memberships. Another third of our revenue comes from the certification program and the certification fees. And the final third of our revenue is via what we call directed funding, which allows members to provide funds specified for a specific project. So in the past, that's actually how we got the certification program off the ground. We had some members come forward, put some money, directed funds towards the certification program, which again allowed us to launch that back in 2016. And I'll just also note that we have a number of nonprofit and governments as members of the foundation. I mentioned all the specifications development takes place in our foundation working groups. There's currently 10 active foundation working groups. The working groups primarily meet online to share information and develop specification documentation. And as I had mentioned, the working groups are made up of a global community of experts that develop and validate the standards through a consensus-based process. So just a quick overview of the foundation. Now we'll do a quick introduction to the FAPI specification. Dominguez, did you want to pick up here?
Sure. Thank you. So FAPI, so the FAPI working group starts as financial grade API, or now it's coming more general purpose protocol, where we are foreseeing the usage of that protocol across different industry and different use cases, right? So that's why we are changing the name of the OIDF. So you might see on the latest documents, you see just a reference to FAPI, as we want to get we want to still be associated with the financial industry, but not that, as we see that the broader industry can use that protocol. So that's why we're on the recent documents, you see just FAPI, right? So it was, as I said, right, so its original or its origin comes from the financial industry for enhancing interoperability between the transmitters and receivers, right? And we come up with different specs. We help ITF with different. We contributed to ITF with different specs in order to enhance this interoperability. Then we come up with as we come along with those years. We see this broad adoption, and that's we're seeing more and more just using the name of FAPI. So, and the idea is there's a lot of the use cases of it that we try to address is to be mutual authenticate the server and the client, make sure that all the messages that are sent across from server to the client and the client to server, all of them are traceable. You have all the traces of it and the cryptographic properties of it to ensure that the origin and then the non-repeatability of the messages, right? So can you move to the second slide, please? Yeah, we're seeing a broad adoption across different industries, right? So there's UK has I think was started it with the adoption of the implementers draft 2. Now they're more and more considering moving to the final version of FAPI 1, and more to come, right? As the second version of the FAPI 2 is it's getting published right now. Right now it's on implementers draft, so more to come. Right, different jurisdictions. Right. So, what is the idea of the program? Right, the certification program. The idea is to to use to be very lightweight of way to make sure that we can validate the identity, the IDPs as well as RPs can be get a stamp that they have implemented properly the specifications, right? So as the specifications are very high level, it might be some ground for some room for interpretation. That's why the certification came along, was created, right? And since then we moved from it has been if you look at the page, a lot of there's some early adopters, very early adopters that were using our toolkit. I don't know, it was written, I think it was Python, then we revamped it to Java, and now we are moving it to we kept the code base on Java. And the idea is to make sure that not only covering the interoperability, but also the security aspect of the protocol, right? So that was the main concern. So far, we have published more 2,000, almost 2,200 certifications, and more on the way. There's a lot of certifications on the queue to be processed. So we're going to hit probably the mark of the 2,200 soon. And there's different profiles, right? So as if you have looked at the certification page, you see different what we call profiles. Each profile, we have a group of the certifications, right? So there's for each purpose, there's one specific group, and for under the main one that are growing recently really fast is the FAPI ID providers, as well as the FAPI reliant parties that we're going to cover this. So for each of those, you have two kinds of requirements, two kinds of groups. One is the general purpose protocol, another one very specific to jurisdiction. So if you look at the FAPI OP page, you're going to see the FAPI general one, the Brazil one, the open insurance one, the Australia, UK, now KSA. The same holds for the RP, right? So, right, you're going to see there different profiles, and each profile covers the specific jurisdiction of the requirements for each jurisdiction. So, what we're going to cover here is the FAPI reliant parties with the very specific of the KSA requirements. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So who's the owner of this? Each profile is the working group, as well as the jurisdiction, right? So we maintain the versions of the certification toolkit, and what we usually do, we create a first version of it, and we evolve it as new bugs might be found, right? So more surface attack might be found, or the restriction change its requirement, right? So as the KSA, it's on the early stage, you might see while the ecosystem evolves, you might see a refining of the requirements, and that will cause changes on the conformance test. So that's why we ask every tester when you're using it to use the latest version of it. You have an option for running the code base or the conformance suite that's open source. It's available on GitLab. So if you want, you can pull the code base and run it locally. But what we always advocate is the users of it use our hosted version that we're going to show you in briefly. And one thing that also happens that we, Domingos or Joseph or whoever is on the team on the conformance test, as we are not the owner, sometimes you raise a concern and we take that concern or that issue that's getting reported and going back to the working group for take on the, as we are not the primary owner of the certification test, right? Or if something related to the ecosystem requirement, we go after the regulator, right? So we're going to work with SAMA on the requirements of the test that you're going to see in a couple of minutes. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so again, what we really want to make sure is that it's fully addressed, that what we try to address here is to be open, which means that we need to be interoperable. We see often some banks reporting that, oh, we're going to implement this or that, or because there's some local policy, their corporate policy, but that's not intended. That's not our goal, right? To match specific requirements for each individual bank. What we try to address here is a broader industry to be interoperable and be scale, and of course be secure. You're going to see a lot of the use cases, a lot of the tests that I'm going to show you. A lot of them are, I would say that more than 80% of the tests scenarios are related to security issues that we see often happening. So as the test, the conformance suite needs to ensure that interoperability, there are two kinds of tests. One for the sharing party, or the OP, what we call it, and the receiving party, that on the OIDC parlance, we call it RP. That's the one that we're going to show you. We're going to cover today. And as you might do the math, right? If you run the numbers, if you don't have a spec that covers interoperability, the number of connections and the number of specifications will be huge, right? If you don't have a stronger spec, right? And one thing that you need to consider is that as soon as KSA goes live with open banking, you're probably going to see requirements getting retrofitted into the conformance, right? As it's going to be, so far it's been the rule of thumb that after going live, new requirements are identified and the changes on the conformance suite happens, right? So far, we have what we have implemented is mainly on the discussion that took place on SAMA. So we think that we are really good to get along. Right, as I said, the conformance suite, that's open source. You see the gitlab.com/OpenID conformance suite. You're going to see there the code base. There's a wiki with a lot of different directions on how to use it, how to get it up and running, how to get how to configure, for instance, the KSA RP test or the OP test. Everything's in there. There's a general instruction page where you go that cover the whole process of how we are foreseeing, right, the complete to be used, and the fair usage of it. And there's very specific KSA nodes that you're going to see here. You see under the slide, related to the OP test or the RP test, right? The production where you're going to use for testing running the RP test. That's under the certification.openid.net. There's you can log in using either Google or GitLab, or if you have any provider, if you use any provider that supports the discovery protocol, you can use that. So we don't see that often, but yeah, that's if your bank it's already using OpenID Connect discovery protocol, you can use that for login in our system. There's a email address, distribution list, that certification at OIDF.org. You can use. Please use that rather than our personal emails. Does the list doesn't have a really wide audience? It's just a handful number of members. So please use that. Me, Mike, Joseph are there. There's 2 more additional members that will be there. So the KSA profile, getting more into the very specific of the KSA profile. Well, what we have is we got the requirements from the SAMA, and we come up with 2 profiles for addressing that requirement, as the number of options are not that big. So as SAMA has defined that the PAR or push authentication requests are mandatory and JARM is not in use. So that simplifies a bit. So when I'm showing you how to configure the RP test, I'm going to show that you don't have that much option to configure there. So which is going to simplify a bit. The way that the scope is handling on the KSA, it's very similar to the UK model, where you have it's a mix. It's a mix of the UK and Brazil banking model. It's a new one. So you have the client credential grant where you're going to use with the scopes equals to account that allows that will be used for the RP to fetch an account that will be a fake account that will be provided by the testing the RP test. And there's one, regardless of the permissions that you have that you're going to ask for, the RP test will only grant you the read accounts basic, and that will be used as the parent point as you have on the spec. I'm pretty sure you already have gone through the specs itself. The account endpoint that will be provided by the test itself. So when I'm running it, I'm going to show you the endpoints that will be created dynamically. So the next slide. Yeah. So that's the status, right? So the OP certificate are open. We already have opened that, and we're accepting submissions there for the OP RP. So we open as of today. So we're assuming that we're good to go, and we're open for receiving submissions there. Okay, so what are the steps, right? So the steps that as the RP test requires you to run your client against a test server that will validate and emulate different error scenarios, or I would say ask or responses that if you don't consider my inquiry into security problems on your side. So there's some provision that needs to be taking place on the server as well as on your side, right? So in order to in order to run those tests, we're going to handle different, different aspects of the protocol that might not be into the regular tester hat, right, or skill set, because we're going to deal with TLS certificates, key material. We're going to rely on JWKS, which requires converting X509 certs to JWK format. And for sure, the test itself is on the security protocol. So a lot of OAuth too, and a lot of FAPI spec itself. So usually what we ask the banks or the fintechs to when engaging into running those tests is to have a more a developer. It's more a developer hat for running those tests rather than a tester. So can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so the process for general process is like what we have here, right? So you're going to configure, I'm going to show you how to configure it. You're going to create a sandbox system, which we ask to be very as identical as it can be to production, right? You need to create those OAuth clients on your sandbox, or you need to configure your client properly. And you're going to configure the testing accordingly as well. And after you're doing that, you start running the test. The test itself has very different so the outcome of the test is just pass it or review or error, right? But you might see on the review, you might have different error message that needs to be set. So you don't see that often on the OP side, but you see a lot on the OP side. Well, what does that mean review, right? So that means that the test itself cannot validate the outcome of the result of it automatically, right? So there's some asset needs to be provided. So you're going to see this review, like if the RP has properly shown an error message to the customer, right? So the end user. It's more like those review are more end user error message that you're going to see. And so you need to take care of proper showing you the error messages, as we're not going to validate exactly what you're showing, but we need to be accurate on what you're showing. For instance, we see a lot of the banks that don't want to don't want to scare the end user of showing some very technical error message, but in order to don't show a very technical error message to the user, show some very inaccurate error message, like, oh, there's a general error, please try again, like something like that, right? When clearly the error might have happened because someone trying to either hacking into a user account or something like that. So the user could not or shouldn't retry it. That's our main concern with this review error. On the and after you have taken care of this UI side, what we also ask you to do is you run the same test for the private key or MTLS, right? If you're going to support both, you need to prepare the logs. I'm going to show you I'm going to run a very simple client here, showing you about how the message should be packed, right? In order to because what we need to check is on the while we are evaluating your submission, we need to check if your client has proper identifier some errors that are specific to the that we try to explore, right? After you have done that, right? So you run the tests, you prepare the logs, you have done the review of all the error messages. Then you're going to pay the certification fee, create the attestation PDF with where you're going to state that you are compliant with the actual profile of KSA, and then you're going to submit it. So the submission should be done at the last step of it, right? That does not preclude you from getting in touch with us via email and or any means to better understand what we are asking for, right? I think that's the general process, right?
Yeah, Dominguez, while you're sharing your screen, why don't we just, while you're getting set up for the actual demonstration, why don't we just pause and see if there's any questions or comments at this point. I'll just reiterate a couple of things while Dominguez is getting set up for the demonstration. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, technical or business related, please send those to certification@oidf.org. I'll drop that into the chat here in just a second. As Dominguez pointed out, that comes to the certification team so that we can be most efficient in responding to any inquiries. And then the second reminder is feel free to stop us as Dominguez works through the demonstration to ask any questions. Feel free to come off mute or drop those questions into the chat, and I'll grab them from chat and queue them up as Dominguez works through the demonstration. But again, we should have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers as well. Thanks, Dominguez. I think you're on mute.
I'm trying to get rid of this doc Zoom. Okay, so here's our host environment for running the certification test. So everything starts under the certification.openid.net. So when you let me log out. So when you try to access this, you're going to see the login, right? So you chose it, how you're going to access it. And once I will log in with my GitLab account. If you have other one, just do it. Here you have some options, right? For where you can create it. You have some options here. If you want to look around, there's the API documentation, the list of all the publishing tests, right? So every test plan that has been published, your test plans, every log that you have published, the available test logs that you have, right? So, and here you have the create test plan. Here you're also going to see here the version of it, right? So this is the version of the conformance suite. You're going to use this one for when creating the PDF of the declaration of the conformance, where you're going to see which is the version that you have used it, right? So let's create a test plan for RP. So if you go to create a test, here you see the UI is already pre-populated a bunch of this stuff. Here we fetch the last test plan that you have created and auto-populated here. So the RP test, the KSA RP test, you can find it under here, under advanced final test, reliant party, right? As you select that, you're going to see some options here, the client execution type, the request object model method, the FAPI client type, the FAPI profile, the FAPI response mode. The key one here, FAPI profile, you want the open banking KSA. And the other ones, the only one that you're going to set a different value is under the client authentication type. So under the request object method, you want pushed. On the FAPI client type, you want the OIDC. Under the FAPI response mode, you want the plain response. So the variance that you might have between your clients is the authentication type that will be used, right? So it's going to be either MTLS or private key. If you're going to here, I'm going to test it out using MTLS, right? When you select that one, the second, the bottom one will be shown here, and you have two options here. You can provide the form or you can enter the JSON format, right? So the JSON is a good one if you want to keep your configuration under version control. The form is good. It's a good one when you're starting your configuration. So I would recommend you to use the form, and then after you have done, grab the JSON that will be created, copy it, and use and enter it or put it in a version control. Therefore, you can share the same test plan across your developers. So there's some options here. The first one is the alias. This alias will be used for running the test. I'm going to show you this is going to be I'm not sure if it's clear enough, but when you are running the test of your client, the conformance suite will mock a server, right? So as we're going to mock, as the server will be mocked by the certification, the conformance suite, some configuration will be provided here, that you would see it on a server. This alias will be used for scoping a server, a mock server on the server side of the conformance suite. So this alias is required. A description here, I would recommend you to use some meaningful for you. You might segregate, you create two different kinds of description, right? So one MTLS and the one for private key, whatever. Publishing, that means that you want ahead of time publish the test plan and the test logs. So if you want to start with private, don't mind it. Later you can change it to publish. And the server. So what is expected from the server is to provide at least one key that will be used for signing the ID tokens and access tokens, right? So there's no, as the KSA is not, you don't have a directory or any PKI, fixed PKI. So that's up to you how you're going to define it, this structure, right? So what is this key, if there's a PKI or not? So if there's X5 on it or not, so it's up to you. Here I'm using an RSA, right? With PS256 for signing the keys. And here you have two, for signing the ID tokens. And there's two clients that needs to be configured here. So the first one is one client that will be used for running the authorization process, right? So you need to provide a client ID. See here, that's coming from the mock bank, right, from Sama. The list of scope here is going to be accounts and OpenID. You want that one. The redirect URI, so it's going to be your redirect URL for your client. So you need to configure it accordingly to your client, right? So how your infrastructure is running. The JWKS of the client, right? So what is the the key that will be used for signing requests or authenticating the client if you're using private key for authentication. And then you have the certificate. Here you don't have the key, the transport key that you'll be used by the client. So it's just for the sake of the conformance suite, validate that your client is accessing it. Then you have a second key, second client that will be you need to provide it. This second client will be used for validate the encryption part, so that your client is handling properly the encryption. Here, the way that I have configured, I'm using the same client with two different configurations. So if you look at the client ID, they're the same. Is the way that will run the client will make a difference, right? So if I'm going to run with encryption or not encrypt, or just plain text or encrypted. So, and also you need to provide from the server side to the server side of the conformance how the encryption will be done. So here I'm using AES 256, the lockout mode. So when I create a plan, you're going to see here there's a very different test scenarios that will be you need to go through, right? Some of them are related. Some of them are. You're going to see what we call final tests. Those tests are happy path, right? Using plain text or encrypted ID tokens. And then you have a different error scenarios that you might have to handle on your client, right? So if the encryption is low strength, right, not supported, that should not be supported. If the claims on the ID token that's missing, your client needs to handle it. If the signature doesn't match, if the ID token has an invalid or has a no algorithm for signing it, and then you have some audience handling, expiration handling. If the token should be only valid, it's too long issued, right? So there's a lot of different scenarios that you need to handle it to run your client through and show that and taking care and reporting that properly reporting that you're detecting the client is detecting each of that scenario. So I ain't gonna run the entire flow here, but I'm showing you some features how the process works, right? So when you run the flow, the test, you're going to see here in the blue box what is the actual outcome of the tests, right? So if you look at here, it say, okay, that's the happy path. But if you go back to the plan and run, I don't know, this invalid hash, right? You have a different error description, right? So the claim as hash should be the hash of the state. It will be invalid, so your client needs to detect that, right? So that's what the message is about. Let me stop it and send it back to plan. So when I run it here, some exported values will be shown here. This will drive how you're going to configure your client, right? So as I have created the test using KSA FAPI alias, the server has created an URL for the consent endpoint. Sorry, the account endpoint, and this one is the consent endpoint, right? So you need to configure your client accordingly. So if you provide different alias, that's going to be a different endpoint. The PAR endpoint will be shown also here, but there's an issuer, right? So if you want to configure your client to use the discovery endpoint, use that one. You can use the issuer and the discovery endpoint. So here the test, see it's on the waiting state, and there's some steps that the test has executed. So those RP tests would usually have the first steps of the test is just validating that your input is good enough for running the test. So each step has a success, or it might have failure, warning, reviews, or info. You have scenarios where what we try to do, the way we try to implement this on RP is that we try to run as much as we can, the test, even though you have a failure on it, right? So I'm going to try to show you how this, for instance, might look like. So here, for instance, the test is waiting request, right? So as this is a mock server, it's has started, exported all the endpoints, and we're waiting for the client to interact with. So I'm going to jump to Postman, and I'm going to use here. Here it's a configure for using the certification.openid/alias test a KSA FAPI, right? So when we hit the server, it's going to show that, okay, we just got a request, right? So you can look more around, right? So what are the headers? What are the body? How that will look like? And what is the TLS as well? So how the protocol was and stuff like that. And you can also see the response of it. What was the response that the RP test has responded to your client, right? You can also see that some valid or assertions, right, are running. So here we're expecting that the cipher under TLS tunnel is one of the expected, right, as the spec, the FAPI spec. You can also see here the link to the actual snippet of the spec that's requiring this, right? So you can go navigate to that, and then you can see that what are the actual requirement that is fundamental to that assertion, right? So you see here there's one, there's another one, just laying out what are the specs that are backing that test to be done. Here we got the well-known, right? And let's interact with the test itself. Here I'm going to run an RP token. Sorry for that. Here, the test has requested the token endpoint, right? We have the response. But if you look at here, there's an incoming request to the token endpoint. Some tests were done, right? But you can see here a failure saying that, okay, the client ID should be presented on the token request. And you can, if you look at the spec itself, it says that the client should be provided, even though it's a mutual TLS, the client ID should be provided. So, and then despite there's a failure, the test has gone on. It's still running and still waiting for, see here, the waiting state. The test itself is already flagged as a fail, but it's waiting. So you can move along and interact with the testing but it's already flagged as testing. Right. So if I include here also the client ID. All right, again. The test, the state machine of the test itself can't fix what was already in place, right? Wasn't designed for fixing whatever is in place, but you have some flexibility here for handling the endpoints. So you can move along with the test itself, and then that's it. Thank you. So what I want to show you is more related to, so when you repeat the test, I'm just going to run here in a local to a client that we have implemented for the testing. That's going to run the whole process, and then you're going to see the whole process running. All right, so you can see here all the tests that all the steps that have been done. Right, so the configuration has been retrieved, the JWKS endpoint was retrieved with the responses. The token was retrieved, the consent was created, was requested by the client, right? So you can see the requirement of it, what was requested, how the TLS was requested, the permission that was requested as well, and the response of it. You can see down there, outgoing, the response to the client, right? And so you have the parent point where you can debug it, every part of it. So if you look at the client itself, yeah, so you have the token created and the account point that was created, was returned. If you go back to the plan, let's run one scenario as, for instance, the invalid hash, right? The S hash scenario. We're running again the client. What will happen here is that the test will be executing. The invalid hash will be created. So the new consent was created. The parent point was called. The authorization was requested. And when redirected to the client, the invalid hash was created. Right. So what has happened? And the test here is flagged as finished. Why it was finished? Because we are not expecting, after returning the ID token with an invalid hash claim, the test itself is not expecting the client to interact with the server anymore, right? So the client can't move forward with the process. It should abort the authorization process. And the way that our conformance validation is done, we're going to require you to send the logging of the client and showing precisely what really has happened. Here, for instance, the client that I'm running, it's showing that, okay, the S hash claim doesn't match the calculated state hash, right? Which means that the client has to run the whole process of validating the ID token and reporting it accordingly. You really want to see that on production in order to better understand how your traffic, and if you have any security problem or someone trying to sneak on your authorization server. So therefore, that's why we asked to show on the logs, that kind of thing. You don't need to send the entire log of your server. What you need to just a snippet showing for this transaction, for this test case that has been like that you ran. The outcome of it is on the client side is that it has detected properly the S hash. Right? And that goes along with the other one. There's some features here where you can run, you can continue the plan, for instance. As soon as you run all the flow on it, you have here the list of all the tests that have been going through. And then you have here the publish for certification, right? So if you need to also, one thing, if you also want to share this test, let's say you have 2 or 3 developers, you have a workflow or someone is running the test and other developers checking it, you can use the publish summary or publishing everything that will publish this log or this test plan to be available publicly in order for the other developers to check it. One other option you have is the download all logs. That will pack the entire test plan and the test and the what we call test log that you can share between your teams. I'll pause it here and check if anyone has any question.
Any questions for Dominguez? Feel free to come off of mute to ask any questions or drop any questions into the chat.
Yes, hello, this is Usama from Muddakhir. I have a question about specifying the keys while running the test. So we specify our JWKs, but also there was to specify keys for the server. So can you please elaborate on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So when that if you look at the, let's go back to the version. So you need to provide a key, right, for issuing the ID token. Let me go back to the test plan, show you. So when if you go to the view logs, I'm getting there. Opening point. If you look at the responses from the ID, the token endpoint, from the authorization, there's tokens, right? 3 tokens. First one is the access token, the ID token, and the refresh token. This ID token, that's a JOT, it's a JWT, right? So if you go to, for instance, JWT.io, that's an ID token created by the conformance test suite, right? And there's a key. Oh, it's already here. That's the key for verifying the keys, right? So if you go back to conformance test plan config, this key has the public as well as the private part. I'm not sure if you notice there's a key in there. All the private parts of the key are here. That will be used by the conformance to issue this ID token. Therefore, the client can retrieve the key, the public part, right? And then validate the signature.
Okay, I understand. So we also have to specify the private key in there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's what I was confused about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is Saman from Darahim. May I ask, will you be sharing the process of applying for the certification? How should we organize our log when we send the PDF and the logs and anything attached with the automated test suite?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's two parts of it. So the first one is the logging part of it, right? So where you're going to retrieve it from the server. The server part that will be organized by the testing scenario, right? With the client logs that you're going to submit it, that you need to create a workflow on your side, right? So I cannot prescribe. What I strongly suggest you is to organize the logs such a way that you can correlate the test name, right? Where you see here the test name to the log itself. The log can be XML or JSON or text file, whatever, right? It works for you.
And for every test, we should share the relevant log only, or the full transactions of that test. For sure, we will not share other transactions, but for the specific test, should we share only the relevant part, last one, for example, when we expose the error or something, or the whole transaction?
Yeah, I would recommend you to share, for instance, something like as I'm showing here, right? So something like, okay, this is the traditional redirector I got with the traditional code, the state, the ID token, and that's the summary, right? So if you have something more log verbose, that also works, but yeah, I don't recommend you to share the entire process, right? So you don't need that. We don't need that as well. We need just to make sure that you have clearly identify what's the problem.
Yes, got it. Thank you very much. One final question, and sorry for taking so much time. We need to run two test plans, one with the MTLS, one with the private keys. When you apply for the certification, this is one application or two different applications?
You can pack the two submissions in one single ticket, or you can also create two different submissions. If you're referring to the fee itself, it's just one single fee.
Thanks. Clear. Thank you very much.
I strongly recommend you to group and create two zip files, one for each profile, and submit it in one single ticket. That will make it simpler for you and simpler for us.
Awesome.
Additional questions, please feel free to come off of mute or drop them into the chat.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
regarding to this MTLS and private key, there's two different PDFs, right? So please don't create one single PDF with both profiles. Create two different PDFs, one with the MTLS profile, another one for the private key.
Yes, so this is Hasni from Spare.
Sure.
So I do have two different questions. So the first question is if the consents authorization is part of the test, and if so, because based on my understanding of the test, that they're gonna be a mock server that would be created during the test plan, and we want to know how to set up the credentials for the customer to enter them while authorizing the consents.
Okay, so you don't need to. There's no account here that will be created. You're going to see something like a dummy account that will be created by. Let me write it. if I run the test again, right? If I'm run my dummy client for sake of demoing, so there will be a very simple account that will be created, dummy account to be returned just for the sake of the test itself. So that's not a real account that you need to consider.
Yeah, thank you.
In your second question?
Did you have a second question before we see if there's additional questions?
Yeah, this is so the first question was regarding the consent authorization, and the second was regarding the credentials. So that's
Okay,
all for me.
great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Mm.
Additional questions? We're in no rush. We have plenty of time, so we want to make sure that we answer any questions that any of the participants have while we're all together.
My name is Shanaf. Okay, I think there is 2 client credentials we need to configure. I just want, will you be able to elaborate on more details on that line?
Yeah,
In
so
terms of configuration.
sure. So the first client, go back to so the first client does not require to provide an encryption key, while the second one will be used for encryption.
So these are the
Right.
informations which has to be updated by us, right?
Yeah,
Or we have to
you're going to provide it. Yeah, so that's, you don't need to provide the private keys here. You just need to provide the public part of the keys that will be used for validating the request or authenticating the client, right? So when you're using PAR, you're going to sign a request object with your private key. When you send it to the server, and the conformance suite will check if the request object signed it properly using this key, right? If you're running the encryption ID token test case, the server, the conformance suite, will use this key for encrypting the key, right? The encryption key, the AES key, that was used for encrypting the content of the JWT. So therefore, you need to provide the public part of the RSA here, for instance, to encrypt, right, or the key transport. Does it make sense?
What about this redirect URI? That also we have to update it, like?
Yeah, so that's so if you're using 2 different clients, right? So I'm not sure your specifics, but here, for instance, I'm using the same, the dummy client that I have created can handle both scenarios, right? So in that case, I'm providing the same client ID with the same redirect URI. If your client requires 2 different head directory URIs or client IDs, right, for handling the non-encrypted ID tokens and encrypted ID token, then you can configure it accordingly, right? So let's say you have, I don't know, because of your the technology stack that you're using, you can't, you will not support the receiving ID tokens encrypted or not encrypted on the same endpoint. You have to create 2 different endpoints. That's how you're going to use that, right? So 2 different head directory IDs and 2 different client IDs. So it's up to you how you want to run it. What I'm trying to say that the way this is organized, it doesn't require you to have 2 different clients. You can have 1 single client. There's just a room for accommodating your environment here.
No, when we started using it, if you have any queries, we can just write to that certification at OIDF.org, right? We'll be
Sure.
able to,
Sure.
we'll be able to get all the updates from the through the communication channel, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Do we need to, this is Sayed from Single View, do we need to register with the same credentials and same company name that we are using it with the Open Banking Lab from KSA?
No,
So that,
no, that's not
it's
required.
not mandatory.
I've just used it that just for the sake of simplicity, right?
Okay.
Any other questions?
And the ID which we are using it to connect to this portal, sorry, this is Shana from SingleView. The ID which we are connecting to run this test case, it should be something from a corporate ID. It can be from any personal email ID as well.
We don't require, we don't enforce that kind of thing. So it's up to you. So if you can use your personal account for running your tests or a corporate account, it's up to you.
Okay.
Well, so when you log it in here, let me.
Yeah, basically we log in with the GitLab account or Google account, right?
Yeah, so if you want, you can do that. So we don't. Because what happened in the other days that we don't store your credential in our site. So we just, what we store is just the subject to ID that was created by GitLab or Google or your, if you're using an OpenID Connect provider with WebFinger, right? So if you're using something like that, what we store is what was the issuer and what is the subject identifier, right? So if you look at the test here, and I'm running it, shows who's the test owner. Just a random name, right? So we don't store who's the being on the backend side, right? So what's the email address? Here is just showing because of just the UI, but we're not tracking it or storing it.
Okay.
Also, if you look at the Gmail account, there's one option here for tokens, right? So you can create tokens for accessing the API documentation. So that's something also you might want to see. You can run, you can integrate this with your CI/CD pipeline. So you can query the API documentation. So there's a bunch of endpoints that we are providing for you to query the logs and configuring your test plans as well. Right.
Yeah, this is for automation point of view.
Yeah. So if you want, so you don't see that much on the being used by the RP, but you see a lot on the OP side, right? So usually on the OP side, you want to run the regular basis the test, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of thing. Any further question?
Any additional questions? Just a reminder, giving everyone a minute to see if there's any final questions before we adjourn. We'll share the workshop recording as well as the deck that we used today with the SAMA team so that they can share that with the RP ecosystem. And just a reminder, if you have any technical or even business questions, please send those to certification@oidf.org.
This is the page under the week where you can find all the configurations. So share this in the chat. So here you can see the steps for configuring everything, describing how this, and there's some sample configuration on it. Right, so how this is going to be configured, how to run it, and stuff like that.
Dominguez, there's a question in the chat asking if we can share the config .json file.
Mhm. I'm pasting it here, but you can also see, you can also find this one here. And then TLS config. As well as the private key. So I haven't shown you here, but yeah, you can configure it for running private key. And if you look at, they are exactly the same config. Oh, Zone says that I can't paste the JSON file.
Any final questions or requests?
Yeah, I have a final question.
Sure,
This is
please.
About the payment. How we try to use PayPal, but it wouldn't go through.
Okay, so there's two payment options. You can use PayPal to make payment via credit card. I apologize, you had issues. The second option is you can just send a request. Please send it to certification@oidf.org. And I'll take it from there. But we can send you a invoice that then you could make a wire payment.
Yeah, we already did that. Just
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll drop the email address into the chat again so that you have it. But please send it there. And as I mentioned, I'll pick that up and take that up with our help desk. So we'll return an invoice that will include all of our banking details on it, and then you can make payment, wire payment at your earliest convenience. And that's open to anyone on this call, anyone in the SAMA ecosystem, anyone certifying. If you're unable to use PayPal, either a PayPal account or using PayPal to pay via credit card, again, just send a invoice request to certification@oidf.org.
If it's okay to explain a little bit about the pricing, because there is a $5,000 and $1,000. What are the difference?
Sure, be happy to. So there's a reduced certification fee for OpenID Foundation members. That's a member benefit. So it's always been the board of directors' goal to make certification accessible to all, whether members or non-members. So that's how it's been priced accordingly based on those goals. So anyone's available to become a member. We welcome membership. Membership term is for 1 year. I'll just drop a link into the chat with respect to the OpenID Foundation membership details. But that's to finish out the answer. That's the difference between the two prices, two fees, I should say. Do we have any other questions?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the other participants? Last call for questions. Hearing no additional questions, I just wanted to thank Abdullah and the SAMA team for the ongoing partnership with the foundation on FAPI certification. I wanted to thank the SAMA team for coordinating this workshop today. And we look forward to receiving your RP certification soon. I will share the details I mentioned earlier, which includes the workshop recording, the meeting deck, and some helpful links with the SAMA team after this call that they can then distribute to the RP ecosystem. And finally, thank you to all the participants today. We appreciate your time, participation, and questions. And again, look forward to your RP certifications soon. Thank you all and have a good day. We'll adjourn the workshop at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Yep. Have a good day.
Thanks.